Welcome to week 7. We are now at the halfway point in the semester. Congratulations. You have been doing a lot of work over these past 7 weeks with learning how to research, learning how to annotate, learning how to do MLA formatting, learning how to write the first part of the research paper with all the background information, introducing the positions, and now you are going to be moving on to learning how to write paragraphs and topic sentences. So let's jump right into it. The first thing you have is paragraphs and using sources. Please make sure you go through each of these links. They are going to help you understand what the difference is between quoting your source, paraphrasing your source, and summarizing your source. Anytime you do any one of these three, you must cite your source per MLA formatting citation. Let me go to the works or the citations page. This is what let me backtrack a little. This is what your works cited page should look like. If you notice, this is called a hanging indent. This is the source. This still goes with that source. Then this is a new source. This is why we do the hanging indent. This is part of MLA formatting, and you do need to do it on your works cited page. Also notice it is in alphabetical order. Your sources must be in alphabetical order, and the only way you put a resource on your works cited page is if you cited it in your paper. So with that, in-text citations, the basics, this is where you want to go to look at. We looked at it when we did part 1. Look at it again for part 2 on how to cite sources within the paper, both quotes, paraphrasing, and summarizing. It is all here for you to look at. It is your responsibility and going to look at that. And again, it is so you do not plagiarize. We did have a couple people on part 1 and plagiarize some of their paper. I gave the option for resubmissions. That option will not be available for part 2 because part 1 was a big learning curve. Part 2, you should not be plagiarizing. I gave information about plagiarizing. You also have this. It is in one of the announcements as a link for many, many different sources, and one of it which is about plagiarism. Where'd it go? Anyway, it's on here about plagiarism. And if you also notice, it has, here it goes, avoiding plagiarism. It also has argumentative essays. It has synthesis on here. So this is a great page of sources to help you understand how to develop a thesis, how to proofread, because you'll be proofreading one of your peers' papers, and that's part of being a disciple of Christ is helping other people out. And so that's part of what we'll be doing with proofreading and giving peer feedback. Transitions and coherence, introductions and conclusions. So I suggest that you use this page. I will put it in the announcements for this week as well, so it's easier access for your writing, because this week you will be working on your rough draft now that your outline and your positions worksheet is completed. And it's also been a great pleasure meeting with many of you. I'll continue to meet with some of you this week. If you missed your writing conference with me, please reschedule, because you do need to have that for week 8. My suggestion is to write the comments and what you learned in week 8 right after the writing conference. Anyhow, go through these various links. This is for your personal learning, your personal growth to develop into better critical writers. Next is learning a video on summarizing, quoting, and framing, learning how to frame the quote, learning how to frame the summarization. You don't want to just quote drop. You do need to frame it with some commentary. You also, when you put a quote or summarization, you also need to put in some commentary. Why is that quote important? How is it important? How does it relate to the position in which you are exploring? Or how does it help in the synthesizing of the commonalities or the differences of the different sources, or the different points of view, I should say, that you are citing. Next is your student teacher conference. If you have not already signed up, or again, if you missed, there's a couple people who did not show up for the writing conferences, and I did email you, then please go back and book another one. They will end next week. Next week is the last week to do these. Week 8 is where you submit your information. The next is student essay samples. These first 2 samples right here are just general essay samples of what an essay looks like, a good introduction with a thesis statement, how body paragraphs are formulated, and conclusion. This last essay, sample 3, is an example of your part 2 essay. I have also submitted 3 more example essays for part 2 on this week's announcement page. So please review those so that you can see what it looks like. You do need to add part 1 to the essay, and then you move on to part 2. Please go back to week 5 and review the guidelines for part 2 and follow those. Read through the sample essays and look through the following. How did the student introduce their topics? Does the thesis statement seem clear and concise? And do you feel the papers fit what the thesis suggested the papers would cover? How effectively do students use as sources in their essays? Did they use them correctly using MLA format? Pick one of the essays to focus on. Write 2 or 3 strengths of that essay and what are 2 or 3 weaknesses of that essay. There's nothing to submit here. This is purely to help you understand how to write an effective essay. When you're done, mark as done. One thing I'm noticing is very clear when students actually do the work that is in here, even if it's something you don't submit, versus those who are not doing the work. It really shows up in the work that you submit. So please work through these. It is, again, for your learning and growth, for your development, to become better disciples of Christ, to become better critical readers and writers, so that you can help others along the way as well. Next is the quiz on confused words. This is remotely proctored, so you do need to make sure that you have Proctorio set up. You practiced that last week in week 5. So make sure that you read over the information here and make sure you're in a quiet place. If there's any technical difficulties, please contact one of these down here. I cannot help you with technical difficulties. I am very tech unsavvy, and I have never used Proctorio before, so I do have the extension on my page. Most of you seem to be able to do just fine in week 5. There were a couple who had some issues, so please do this earlier in the week rather than waiting until the 29th. Because if you wait last minute and you don't get the help you need, your quiz will be late. Also, a quiz on plagiarism. Again, do not plagiarize. It is stealing someone else's work and ideas and presenting it as your own. I will report anybody who plagiarizes. I gave fair warning on part 1 for some who did plagiarize. I understand it's a big learning process, big learning curve. That's why I gave that reprieve, but you cannot plagiarize. If you're caught plagiarizing, then there will be consequences. It does go against academic honesty standards that you said you would follow. So please make sure, again, that you are citing your sources. When in doubt, cite your sources. The MLA Purdue OWL page helps you with everything you need to know how to do on citing sources, putting in the works cited page, how to set up your paper in MLA formatting, and so much more. So utilize that resource to help you as well. And of course, if you have any questions, please ask. I am here to help you. And that is it. I do want to show you that in week 8, on November 3rd, is when your rough draft will be due for peer review, very similar to what we did for part 1. Again, this will be helping your peers, and you'll be that disciple of Christ, helping your peers point out what the strong points are in their essay, where the weaker points are, places that they need to beef up their paper or explain further. Also, make sure that you are utilizing everything you've learned in the past grammar and structure quizzes. You had 2 weeks on commas, so I should not be seeing a lot of comma splices. I should be seeing commas used correctly in the paper and not peppered throughout the paper unnecessarily. Also, combining sentences, making sure you have clear and concise sentences and word usage and things like that. And again, any questions, please ask in the announcements. I do post announcements. I do put things in the announcements that you need to know, along with examples that you need to know. This is just the MLA formatting. Every assignment needs to be in MLA formatting with proper MLA heading. I did not grade hard on the positions paper because only one person put in MLA heading. You do need to do MLA heading on every single assignment. I also have information here under writing conference sign up. You will have links within there. And this is where I put the examples for the position worksheet. I have 2 examples and the example for the outline. And if you notice, some students have asked questions and I gave responses. You can also give responses to your peers as well. Again, being a disciple of Christ and responding with what you know in there. I will have the week 7 overview up. So please make sure you look over that information, watch this video, get more criteria. One thing I will be going over is your essay later this week and going a little bit more in depth and looking at how that is to be done. So look for that video a little bit later this week. So again, congratulations for making it to week 7. I look forward to continue to work with you. And if you haven't signed up for that writing conference, please do so, because this is the last week to write up or to sign up for that and then get it written up for week 8. And enjoy writing your rough draft this week. I'm excited to read part 2, especially after talking with a number of you about what you're writing about. And have a great week.